Hi, this time I wanted to talk about running the post-apocalypse in a tabletop role-playing game. This is somewhat connected to my other video where I talk about running an apocalyptic setting. You will find a link to that in the description of this video. I think that the post-apocalyptic genre is one of my favorite genres in tabletop RPGs. I don't even know where to start because it has so much potential. I think that even if you want to run things pretty focused on action, there is always this sense of mystery of what was or what happened before. Let me give you an example of how things can radically change because of this. I talked a bit about this in another video, but a lot of you are familiar with the Greyhawk setting from Dungeons and Dragons. I've mentioned that when it was created, there were some pretty, how would you say, clear ideas or signs that this is actually a post-apocalyptic setting, because some people still consider that Gamma World or Metamorphosis Alpha, they could be considered the past of Greyhawk. If you consider Greyhawk to be the future of those settings, some places such as the Barrier Peaks with that strange technology, it makes a lot of sense that such places exist still. And the magical items, they are perhaps ancient technology as well. Maybe the very existence of magic and psionics, as I've mentioned in another video, psionics is the result of combining psychic with electronics, psionics. Maybe those incredible powers, abilities, effects, they are related to that ancient technology. And when it comes to the dungeons, the dangerous sites to explore, the monsters, if you take a look at those as if they were like bunkers or emergency refuge, sorry, how would you call them? Shelters, emergency shelters. Maybe some great cataclysm occurred in the past. So it's logical that many treasures, powerful items, artifacts, they are hidden in those places underground because they were shelters. And the monsters within those shelters, even those beasts that look like mutants, displacer beasts, rust monsters, they could be the result of an experiment, mutations, bioengineering and such. So yes, as I've mentioned, the post-apocalypse genre is a genre of mystery. How were things before the current dangerous times? Because when it comes to the present of the post-apocalypse, there is no longer a looming threat. There is no great cataclysm or calamity waiting to happen. If there is such, it is like in the background and it's not as threatening as before. The apocalypse has already happened in those settings, obviously because of the name, it is implied. So now all of the dangers, the hazards, the enemies, they are in a way a bit more under control, or they have fallen under a certain normalcy, because what was the worst thing that could happen to the world has already happened. And that's why you have this wrecked version of the world. Although going back to Greyhawk, you can see that Greyhawk could be considered the post-apocalypse. There is no longer that broken world. There is a semblance of order with the kingdoms, different agreements between the nations, or rather the realms. Even if you have threats such as Use or Suktumoi, there is still a semblance of people working together, trying to keep some sort of order, bringing order to the chaos. But when it comes to post-apocalypse in general, there are some important considerations. So for example, what you use as currency, what you use as valuable objects. I remember I think it was the first manga of Fist of the North Star, you have this scene where this wealthy couple, You can tell that they are rich. They are escaping in their car from this band of, how do you say, bandits, motorcycle riding bandits. And they catch up to them, they kill them, and they open the trunk of the car, and you see briefcases with money. And you would think, well, they are going to take the money, right? But no, money is unimportant in that setting. So they pull out the money as if it were trash. They just throw it outside. And they were after what was underneath the money. You have water. So that's one of the valuable resources in that setting. But water becomes more valuable than money. So you can play around with those concepts as a game master. You can create a world where you cannot expect valuable things from the past, from a time that is no longer the way that the currency was used in the past no longer applies. So now it could be anything. It could be water. It could be seeds. I think it was the Mutant Epoch. It's been a long time since I have played that game. Bullets are also currency. I think it was that setting. Well, if not Mutant Epoch, it was another tabletop role-playing game. But bullets are the currency. That's another consideration with the weaponry. Can be quite rare and quite different from the past. What was used in the past to kill people. Oh, and remember, just in case something weird happens with the algorithm, all of this is, of course, science fiction, science fantasy, etc. So when it comes to weapons, maybe now people rely on melee weapons once again instead of firearms, because the factories, the places where they produce firearms en masse, they are no longer functioning. Perhaps a few select factions have taken control over them. Perhaps the knowledge on how to fabricate firearms, bullets, etc. has been somewhat lost. This also connects to ancient technology. Now, in another video, I talked about the technology from the past, that they say, oh, you had these strange vehicles and tools and weapons from the past, and they were superior to our current technology. And in that video, I think I was mistaken in a particular aspect, because I took a look, or what would you say, I approached things from a particular perspective where I missed a very important consideration. My original point of view was that many of those pieces or artifacts of technology, perhaps they were exaggerated, because otherwise we would be using those advanced, artifacts, technology, etc. But what if there was this group of people that also had advanced technology and they wanted to keep that technology for themselves? So they used their technology to eliminate the other people that had the same level of technology, or perhaps a bit lower, erased it completely from the past. They changed the history books. They manipulated everything. It was no longer history, it's his story. That's one way in which you can eliminate the technology. It would make sense that that technology, or even a more advanced version of that technology, still exists in the world. Have you noticed that in this science fiction or science fantasy setting, the, let's say, unidentified objects that fly, and I'm going to say it like that to avoid things with the algorithm, have you noticed that they changed models with the times? It's kind of like when you see a car from a particular decade in history, and as the years go forward, the design of the car changes, and suddenly these flying objects, they also change their design. Very suspicious, don't you think? So yes, under that angle, looking at things from that perspective, then it is possible that there was advanced technology in the past in that science fiction post-apoc setting. If you were to run a campaign in that post-apoc world, maybe it's about discovering that lost technology. What if people what if people have been kept in ignorance and they are just inhabiting a very small part of the world in that sci-fi? And there is actually an entire continent or more pieces of land where people live in a more advanced way, even in present times. So you have this section of the post-apoc world where people are almost living like cavemen, with taking what they can, rescuing what they can, or salvaging the resources from a time that has long gone by. But they are ignorant that even in present times, in another place entirely, there are other civilizations enjoying the benefits of the most advanced technology. What if you have this place, let's call it Antarctica. Antarctica. And this place, supposedly no one can go to that place because it is protected by the, let's call it the evil organization of nations. The evil organization of nations, they don't want anyone to go to that place, even though you have places such as let's call it Rothschild Island and Rockefeller Plateau in that sci-fi. And they don't want people to go visit those places or beyond those places because they may end up discovering those other pieces of land with more advanced technology in that sci-fi post-apoc setting. And that's very interesting, don't you think? Now, when it comes to this ancient technology of the post-apocalypse setting, it will also explain certain vehicles from the past. In my other video that I mentioned, where I talk about these sorts of things, here in, for example, in Mexico, let's call it the fictional version of Mexico, just to be safe. Here in Mexico, we have a very suspicious, interesting image. It is known as the astronauta de Palenque, Palenque's astronaut. And in that image, in this sci-fi, in that image, you see this man inside of a vehicle. It looks just like a very sci-fi strange vehicle, and it is moving through this strange environment. A lot of people immediately say, oh, that's a spaceship. A spaceship. Remember, I'm not saying the ace pronunciation, just to be safe. Spaceship. And I said, what if it's a submarine? And I gave you an example of an ancient submarine that was documented. But now, when some people have looked into the nature of our world in that sci-fi setting, have you ever thought of the expression waters of the firmament? So in this sci-fi setting, what if the world is contained inside of something that could be considered... Yes, I don't want to trigger the algorithm. I'm just going to say that the world is contained in something. And outside of that something, there could be waters in that sci-fi, the place where we live. And this is all science fiction. This is all science fiction. Science fiction. Okay. It would make sense then. It doesn't need to be a spaceship. It could be a vehicle that somehow they found an entrance into those waters, and that way maybe you can actually move above that world on inside of the waters of the firmament. And you can create an entire plotline around this in that post-apocalypse world. For example, what if you have like a faction or a number of factions that are the remnants of the tyrants of the past, and they want to keep people ignorant from this reality? Perhaps you could say that when they launched things into up there in space, they were not vehicles, they were actually weapons. Let's say nuclear rockets, and they were of the purpose, they had the purpose of destroying that thing that is above, so they could penetrate those waters in that sci-fi setting. Maybe the characters are looking for the remaining things that they shoot into space to investigate this matter. So when it comes to post-apocalypse settings, I think the past is very important to investigate. If you are designing a post-apoc world, you could follow two routes or a combination of both. Maybe you come up with a moment in the past where the cataclysm, the apocalypse happened, and then you base everything around that. Everything that came after, you just need to take some ideas from that past, how the politics, the vehicles, the society, the economy was handled in the past, and put remnants of those things in the present post-apoc world. Or maybe it could be the other way around. You start to run things. This is more like a loose way of handling things. You start to run your campaign, and whenever the characters encounter something, an artifact, technology, science, something related to philosophy from the past, something related to culture, then you start to use those findings to build the past world. So maybe you could be handling everything through improvisation, using random tables perhaps, and then as you piece things together, you start to create these civilizations from the past and what caused the apocalypse, so that things resulted in the current post-apoc world. Or maybe it's a combination of both. Maybe you create the old world, you start running things in the current post-apoc world, and as the characters discover things, you add those pieces to your idea, your base idea of the world before. And so the campaign enters a steady flow of infinite adventure seats based on your original idea and whatever that the characters find in the current post-apoc world. So those are my thoughts on running post-apocalypse worlds. I think that the main distinction between apocalyptic settings and post-apocalyptic settings is pretty clear. In apocalyptic settings, there is this threat that is about to happen. It threatens to end the world as we know it. But in post-apoc, the threat has already happened. The world somehow survived, and now you need to deal with the aftermath, and there could be some ghosts from the past. That is, anything related to technology, science, culture. This also allows you a lot of room for experimentation when it comes to the use of psionics, magic. Could be related to the technology of the past. Maybe some huge universal effect occurred where it caused the loss of physics. Everything related to physics, chemistry, everything has changed. And that's your explanation as to why the characters can now use these psionic powers, these magic abilities, etc. And it usually results in a variation of post-apoc. Maybe it's gonzo post-apoc. Maybe you want to keep things more on the side of science as we know it. It could be a bit more hard sci-fi. Maybe it's science fantasy with a lot of magic and such, as handled in tabletop role-playing games. So yes, definitely the post-apoc genre is one of my favorite genres. I want to know your thoughts about this genre or sub-genres related to this. How do you run things? Your experiences when playing post-apoc settings? What are your favorite post-apoc RPGs or settings? Let me know in the comment section below. So thank you for watching this video, and thank you for your likes and your comments. If you have any other questions or comments, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that are going the extra mile to support the channel. If anyone else wishes to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you and see you later. Oh, and just in case this video gets taken down, remember that I have a backup channel in Odyssey. I'm going to put the link to that in the description, and you will also find it in my information tab of my channel. Once again, thank you and see you later.